Thank you guys for tuning in today and welcome to another episode of The Source. I'm your host Zan Raza. Today we will be talking to Ariel Gold, the National Co-Director of Code Pink, about the situation unfolding in Iran. Code Pink is a women's-led grassroots organization working to end US wars and militarism. Ariel Gold, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Let us begin with some background on the recent US attacks on Qasem Soleimani. Who was he and why was he attacked now?
Well, Soleimani is one of the most important people in Iran. He was one of the most important people in Iran until the U.S. assassinated him. He is a military general who, among other things, was responsible for the defeat of ISIS in Iraq and for preventing ISIS from breaching the borders of Iran. He also had an approval rating inside Iran of over 80%, probably the most popular person in the country, incredibly beloved. He came from a very modest background and fought in the Iran-Iraq War and came to lead the Revolutionary Guard's activities outside of Iran, hence his ability to beat back ISIS.
The US government claims that Iran, especially Qasem Soleimani, is responsible for hundreds of deaths, US soldier deaths, and also recent violence against the US embassy that happened last week. Even the German government shares this criticism. What is your opinion? Is Iran a destabilizing force in the region?
It is not Iranian aggression that we should be talking about. We should be talking instead about U.S. aggression. Since Trump has pulled the United States out of the Iran nuclear deal and implemented a brutal policy of maximum pressure, including crippling sanctions, that country has been plunged into been under war, under attack, an economic attack from the U.S., with Trump doing such things as prohibiting U.S. companies and other companies across the world from trading with Iran. These sanctions have prevented life-saving medicine from getting to the Iranian people, punishing an entire nation's population of 80 million people. This was already economic warfare. And in the meantime, we should be talking about the legacy of U.S. aggression in the Middle East. The disastrous Iraq War, which even across the U.S., both sides of the aisle admit was a horrific mistake that led to the rise of ISIS. And the fact that after that, we kept our troops inside the Middle East, inside Iraq, and Trump, who campaigned on ending the endless wars, did no such thing, and he's instead starting another war. So that is who the aggressor is here, and responsibility for the situation that we are in lands squarely at the door of the White House.
So let us pick up on that because, in my opinion, right now the coverage, the history of US legacy, his involvement in Iran is being completely ignored. Could you talk about, like, for example, what happened post-World War II when the US government decided to intervene in Iranian politics?
Sure. In 1953, the US, along with the UK, partnering with the UK, orchestrated a coup overthrowing democratically elected leader Mohammad Mossadegh. And the reason that the UK and the US orchestrated that coup was because Mossadegh was nationalizing Iran's oil, Iran's resources. God forbid for the US and the UK that Iran wanted to have its own resources, rather than those resources belonging to colonial imperialist states. So they orchestrated that coup, reinstated the Shah, who was brutally repressive, and who the Iranians finally overthrew in 1979. Regardless of any criticisms that the US or others may have about Iran's current government, the Islamic Republic of Iran, which came into power with the Iranian Revolution in 1979, it is none of our business what the government of another country is. Iran is a sovereign country, and if the people of that country want to reform their government, that is up to them. It is not for us in the Western world to impose upon them.
So who is profiteering from these attacks, the US attack on Qasem Soleimani domestically in the United States?
Well, first of all, I want to mention that how much Israel and Saudi Arabia benefited or profited from this. They've been pushing the U.S. to do this for many years, and Israel, Netanyahu in particular, are certainly gloating over this. In the US, we saw weapons stocks go up. We saw weapons stocks rise as soon as this was announced. And it's always the weapons companies that profit from these wars. And they stand to profit enormously this time as thousands more troops are being deployed right now to the Middle East.
So what about the hardliners in Iran? Will this push them further and further to a point of no return? And do you think we've reached that point of no return to have friendly relations with Iran?
Well, the brutal US sanctions were already emboldening the hardliners. If the US had ever claimed, or the US was claiming that we were imposing these sanctions to help the people of Iran, but in fact, the campaign of maximum pressure was emboldening the hardliners and moving us further from any diplomatic solution. Trump's decision to assassinate Soleimani, one of the most powerful leaders in Iran, may very well, it's unfortunately very likely that this will plunge the US, Iran, and the entire Middle East into a catastrophic war.
How's the mainstream media's coverage been on this? Have they had like anti-war voices on, and have they provided enough context on the situation that unfolded recently?
Unfortunately, just like we saw with the lead up to the Iraq War, the mainstream US media is quickly falling into puppeting the voice of the White House, prefacing things with the claim that Soleimani had blood on his hands, is responsible for the killing of US troops. Really paving the way, and too few Democrats are speaking out. Too few Democrats are speaking out. You know, Congress just had the opportunity with the passing of the National Defense Authorization Act to include amendments to repeal the 2002 AUMF and to make clear that the United States cannot to war without congressional approval. Congress, including the Democrats, did not include those amendments. The Democrats capitulated to the Republicans, did not get those amendments in. Now we're in a situation, very, very dangerous situation, and we certainly need Congress to get a war powers resolution passed, the floor, and then passed. And we need the mainstream media to stop parroting the White House, to look at the danger that we're in, and to, own up to their role in the lead up to the Iraq War and see that they do not make the same mistake again.
Talk about grassroots movements and protests emerging in the United States regarding this topic. Just a side note, in Germany, there has been no movement. Nothing has been happening so far as we've been observing. How is it compared to Germany in the US? And second part of the question is, what can individuals do to stop a conflict from breaking out?
Well, while the mainstream media is either silent or going the wrong and opposite direction, the people of the US are rising up and speaking out and taking to the streets. There are over 78 protests, almost 100 protests taking place across the United States just today alone. People in the streets of Washington, D.C., New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, so many more places. And in fact, there is a protest taking place in Germany. There is one in Berlin today that has joined this is a U.S. National Day of Action because it's the U.S. that is doing this, but we are working towards as well a global day of action, asking people to come out in the streets across the world And the response in the US, we put out this call for a day of action only a few days ago, has been enormous. The people of the US absolutely remember the Iraq War and what got us there and do not want to see another war. In fact, polling in America consistently shows that Americans, including Trump supporters and Trump's base, do not want another Middle East war. They want the US to end the endless wars and pull out of the Middle East. And there's a lot that people can do. So today wasn't the only day to protest. People can take to the streets across the world every day. And specifically, you can go to our website, codepink.org, to see where protests are taking place and to take action to appeal to U.S. Congress to do everything in their power to prevent this from turning into a war.
Ariel Gold, National Co-Director of Code Pink, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me on.
And thank you guys for tuning in today. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to donate so we can continue to produce independent and non-profit news and analysis. I'm your host, San Raza. See you guys next time.